Hello, I'm Jodie Stewart and I'm the Disaster Preparedness Coordinator for the Eden Community Access Centre's Disaster Preparedness Project. How much do you understand about how disasters are managed across the Bega Valley Shire? Would you like to know more about better preparing Eden and surrounding villages for future disasters? Tune in to Prepared for Disaster every Wednesday morning at 11, right here on 2SEA, as I share useful information and chat to good people doing great things in preparedness, recovery and community resilience. Prepared for Disaster. It's all about building stronger, prepared local communities, ready to face more frequent disasters. Hello and welcome to the Prepared for Disaster program, a new program about communities and disasters. I'm your host, Jodie Stewart, and I'm the Disaster Preparedness Coordinator for the Eden Community Access Centre. I'll be joining you fortnightly as we undertake a series of conversations about disasters and the role that communities do and can play in response to increasing disaster events. This show is produced and broadcast on the lands of the Thawa people of the Yuin Nation. I would like to pay my respects to Elders past and present and to all First Nations people joining us today. I would also like to acknowledge First Nations sovereignty of the lands, air and waters, and that this sovereignty was never ceded. This is, was and always will be First Nations land. A trigger warning. In this show, we will be discussing disasters and their impact. Some content may be distressing. Please look after yourself while listening. Or if you think this is not for you, you can come back to the broadcast in about an hour. The Prepared for Disaster program is part of the Disaster Preparedness Project. The Disaster Preparedness Project is an Eden Community Access Centre initiative. The project is funded through the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority, formerly Resilience New South Wales, and is a 2-year funded initiative. So hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Prepared for Disaster program. We have a very exciting show for you today. We have 3 very special guests joining us. Last week I spoke with Shari Bent from Disaster Relief Australia and George Barrett from the Australian Business Volunteers about mapping and disaster recovery and preparedness and the Capable Communities Big Map project that is coming to the Eden area in March. I'll play the interview for you soon. I'm also chatting with Eden resident Peter Whiter, live in the studio. Peter will be chatting with us about the Project Lab and a very exciting project he's working on with other Project Lab members. Peter will be in the hot seat at about 11:30 today. But first, I want to talk about maps and mapping and the big map that is coming to the Eden area on March 18th. So Tuesday, February 28th, I sat down with Shari Bent from Disaster Relief Australia and George Barrett from the Australian Business Volunteers, who are working together to host the Capable Communities Big Map workshop. I wanted to chat with them to better understand the role that maps and mapping played in disaster preparedness, recovery and resilience, and also offer them the opportunity to talk with you all about the Big Map workshop that they will be hosting on March 18th at Jigamy Farm at the Keeping Place in Broadwater. So let's hear from Shari and George about maps and mapping and the Big Map. Okay, so welcome Shari and George to the show. So here at the Prepared for Disaster program, we love to share human stories. Our guests aren't just talking heads. They're flesh and blood human beings with marvellous stories to tell. So I want to start with you, Shari. Tell us your story. Who are you and what makes you tick?
So my name's Shari. I'm a single mother of 2 who lives on 40 acres in northern New South Wales. And I just love spending time with my family and my friends and helping people in my community and helping people, which is how I ended up in this role.
Awesome. Sound like the absolute perfect person for the role, Shari. George, I'm going to bring you into this storytelling conversation. What's the George Barrett story? Who are you and what makes you tick?
Hi. Hello, everybody. Yeah, I live in Manly on the northern beaches in Sydney, and enjoy the beach life. And I have a 13-year-old daughter, and that goes to McKellar. But essentially, a little bit about myself: working in community development. I've worked in with 20 years plus experience working in Aotearoa, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, metropolitan Sydney and public housing, and Waterloo and Redfern, and more recently working in southeast New South Wales around bushfire recovery work. So I've kind of worked across the whole range of not-for-profit community groups, from tribal groups to migrant groups to Aboriginal land councils to everything in between. And so, I kind of enjoy, meeting diverse communities. It's like working in Sydney particularly, there's such diversity that resides in the city, and some of the work that I've done, English hasn't been the first language. It's like I've had to work with interpreters to get the work done. So it's all very interesting. So I like meeting community and people and learning about their place and their history, so I can get immersed in, their sense of place and, how I can support them in my role in the organisation that I may happen to be working for.
Awesome. Thanks, George. And it's great to have connections to communities up north. So I've had the great pleasure of getting to know both Shari and George in my role as disaster preparedness coordinator, and it's great to connect with people working in the northern part of the state. We both obviously share an experience of disaster, and it's great to be able to share insights and knowledge, which is really fantastic. Shari, I want to return to you. If you can just tell us a little bit about, you work for Disaster Relief Australia. So who is Disaster Relief Australia? What do you do, and what services do you provide to the community?
Yeah, sure, Jodie. Disaster Relief Australia is a non-for-profit organisation that unites the skills and experiences of veterans and first responders with motivated civilians to assist communities after disasters. So we also now assist communities to build awareness of the hazards that they may face in the future and explore ways which to mitigate them. We're just all passionate people who really want to help people, and we know that after disasters, people need help, and that's something we're really passionate about. So that's a little bit about us.
Yeah, awesome. Passionate people doing really important work. Thanks, Shari. George, you're the Senior Project Manager for the Australian Business Volunteers. So can you tell us a little bit about that organisation? Who are the Australian Business Volunteers, and what role do they play in the disaster preparedness, recovery and resilience space?
Okay. Australian Business Volunteers is an international development agency with over 40 years, operating in the Asia-Pacific region, deploying skilled business professionals overseas as business mentors to small to medium business enterprises to alleviate poverty in developing countries. So as a response to the Black Summer bushfires, ABV brought a lot of that expertise back to Australia, back home, to assist with the communities to recover, and have been involved in the bushfire recovery space since September 2020 up until September 2022 last year, where the federal government pivoted, and state government pivoted from recovery to disaster preparedness. And so hence we've shifted from recovery to preparedness in the program that we're offering to communities. And that program we're running, is across 4 southeast New South Wales LGAs, Bega Valley Shire, Eurobodalla, Queensland Palarang and Snowy Valleys. So we are operating across those 4 LGAs, but we have previously operated across those 4 LGAs under our previous bush fire recovery program. So we were a successful recipient for the bushfire disaster, the Disaster Risk Reduction Fund in October last year. So the program had just rolled out from October last year when we started doing some of the early first rounds of key stakeholder engagement with community stakeholders across the 4 LGAs. So that's what ABV is from an international perspective and on a more domestic New South Wales. We have had a similar program running across Victoria, which has just come to an end just recently.
Awesome. Thanks, George. And we'll get back to some of the more specific programs that you're hosting here in Eden as well. Now, Shari, many communities on the far south coast and certainly up north where you are still recovering from cascading disaster events, so fires, floods, COVID, all that sort of compounding trauma. Now, recovery has no end point, and it can often be a long and winding road to recovery. In your work with communities, what sort of successful recovery models have you seen, and what do you believe makes them successful?
That's a really good question, and I think any successful model that we have seen and come across is community-led and driven. That's been the key everywhere we go. If a community leads its own and owns its recovery, the effects are longer term and they're more successful. And what we've seen is what works in one community could be completely different to what works in another community. And ultimately, it's for the community to decide what's best for them and what fits them and what works and lead that. And that, you can't, it's not a one size fits all. It's definitely got to be community led and community owned.
Yeah, absolutely. The power of community. George, I'd like to ask you that question as well. In your work, what have you witnessed have been some successful models for recovery, and what do you think made them successful?
Certainly, I would agree with Shari 100%. It's community led, community owned, and some very good community leadership in a lot of the cases where there's good leadership is progress, but where there's a strong group of leaders, it's very successful, it's uneven. The whole recovery journey is uneven. Not every community is blessed with really very good leadership. Some communities, the demographics are different. The socioeconomics are different. Not every community is the same. So what works well in one won't work well in another. So it's being able to listen to communities and be patient. It's I guess recovery, as you say, it's an ongoing process. Is it ever complete? I guess there's healing and there's the process of recovery for adaptation or whatever you can describe that, but there's not a one size fits all. It's definitely driven by the community. If it's going to be sustainable and owned, it has to be. It's the only way forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, George. The Australian Business Volunteers are working with the Disaster Recovery Australia to bring the big mapping activity to Eden on March 18th. So, Shari, I want to talk to you a little bit about maps and mapping. So, maps and mapping, they have been a big part of your relief and recovery operations through your organisation. So can you tell us a little bit about how that works? What role do maps play in relief and recovery efforts?
Yeah, look, the big map allows us to better understand the complexities within the different communities. So a map gives you a great oversight of where you are and what you've got, and you can plan and use that as a scenario base. You can see what's around you to then develop that into a map that you can walk on and stand on. Just allows the community to see it better, envision it better, to stand on your house and be able to look around and see it just gives you more of an oversight. So it's a really great tool for seeing hazards, for scenario planning, for all that kind of stuff generally. But in this instance, the communities who may not get the opportunity to ever see their community from this angle, it's a fantastic tool and a fantastic enabler.
Yeah, awesome. So can you tell us why you think members of the community here in Eden should come along to this event, and what will they take away from it?
Look, it is a very unique opportunity for community members to see where they live from a different perspective, but they'll probably gain a clearer understanding of what hazards could threaten their community and understand how they might mitigate them. But I think for me, coming from a community that was affected as well and has been affected, and when it happened in my community, it allowed us the opportunity to open up and share stories and share experiences with people who'd been through the same thing, and that was huge for our community to realise that potentially we weren't the only ones feeling that way, and that the sentiment across the community was the same. It just was almost healing for us as a community.
Yeah, those shared experiences and that coming together is so important, isn't it? So
it is, and it's.
Sorry, Shari, you go.
You're right. It's just a really great way in a safe space of being able to do that.
Yeah, fantastic. So how might the big map then, because I understand this is bringing the big map to Eden, this is an opportunity for all the community to come together and get a sort of spatial understanding of hazard risk and where they fit within that landscape. So can you tell us about how it can be used by individuals and groups across our community, and can you give us some examples of how that might be used?
Sure. So we leave this big map in the community. It becomes an asset for the entire Bega Valley, and it can be used in so many ways. So I know of places where RFS and SES have used it for scenario-based training. I know of events that have been held for debriefing, mental health debriefing, where it's been used. It's been used in schools for the school students to come along and have a look and for the younger generation to throw their thoughts and ideas behind it. There's just, it's your imagination is the limit for how it can be used. So it's an amazing asset that a community can use going forward.
Yeah, awesome. George, I want to bring you back into the conversation. So the Australian Business Volunteers, they're working with Disaster Relief Australia to bring this big map to the Bega Valley Shire, and you're hosting it here in Eden. Can you speak to us a bit about these partnerships and who else is involved?
Yes. So we're with Disaster Relief Australia to, as part of the raising, disaster risk awareness to the community, but also with the big map, it's an opportunity to draw the whole district into one space and to get a collective kind of consciousness going where everybody can see what everybody else is doing. So we've kind of haven't done that on that scale before. We're used to doing place-based projects with a community, but not on a district-wide scale. And the promotion for the program has gone to the whole Shire. So it is specifically for the community in Eden, but the big map is Bega Valley Shire, so it covers the whole Shire. So we're not, that is what DRA specialises in, the mapping, and we consider that as actually very complementary and aligned to what we are doing. And we're wanting to work with everybody in the disaster risk reduction space. So we're happy to collaborate with anybody in the space without having to create any duplication or competition or anything like that, because we all want to be part of the solution. And so it's our partnership. We do have ARA, which they're more of a specialist role that are not quite out up front. It really relates to infrastructure projects that require, ARA being a top-tier global engineering consultancy, there isn't anything they can't engineer. So, but there are quite parameters around how they kind of provide pro bono support. So they are another one of our partners. And we do have an associate partner with Girls on Fire that's working with young women in the training of combat emergency services. So they are pretty much the other partners that we are working with in the program we're rolling out.
Awesome. Yep. Thank you, George. And collaborations are so important, drawing on all those fantastic resources. Well, thank you. I'm chatting with Shari Bent from Disaster Relief Australia and George Barrett from the Australian Business Volunteers. They're working together to bring the Big Map exercise to Eden on March 18th. Thank you so much, Shari and George, for joining me today.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
Thank you.
Bye.
If you're interested in participating in the Capable Communities Big Mac workshop on March 18th, it kicks off at 9 a.m. at the beautiful Jigaby Farm Hall in the Keeping Place at Broadwater. If you want to learn more about the workshop, you can contact me on jodie.accesscentre@gmail.com. Now, before we welcome our very special guest, Peter Whiter, to the show, I think it's time for a song. Now, this song was selected by our guest. It is Mr. Neil Young, Don't Let It Bring You Down. That was the brilliant Neil Young with Don't Let It Bring You Down. That song was chosen for our listeners by Mr. Peter Whiter, who's joining us in the hot seat here this morning. Peter, why did you choose that song?
Good morning, Jodie, and good morning, listeners. Yes, I'm a big fan of Mr. Young, have been since my school days. That song was a bit of a war cry, I suppose, for back when we were trying to save the building that is the Hotel Australasia, and I think it just sort of fitted with that cause quite soundly, and I used to listen to it quite a lot back then and play it.
Yeah, wonderful song. Don't let it get you down. Keep on going. So when I asked for a description for you, Mr. Whiter, you told me that you were a videographer, photographer and a whale aficionado. I'm really, really interested to hear more about this. What is this? What is the Peter Whiter story?
Oh, well, the Peter Whiter story, I guess I'm just an Eden boy through and through. I, went to all levels of schooling here in Eden. Started photography and music, which are my two main passions in life, while I was at school in Eden. Left school and went into the family building business, which continued right through pretty much until about 2017. While I was building, though, I got my student and then private pilot's licence. Then went on and trained to get my commercial pilot's licence, which I got, and while I was doing that, I got a couple of the subjects out of the way for the senior commercial pilot's licence. Then in about 2013, we discovered the facade of the Australasia, which took up a fair bit of my time in the ensuing 7 or so years. But when the building finished, Tony Ward and myself started up Double Take Photographics, which we're still working heavily in at the moment. And then a couple of years before the fires, I became the president of the chamber and was the president during the fires and for about the first 8 or 9 months of the pandemic. And then that's about me.
Wow, you have a very extensive and varied CV. Activist, pilot, photographer, and now Project Lab member. So I've invited you on the show today because I wanted to talk to you about your experience in the Project Lab, being one of our Project Lab superstars. Now, you've been coming along to the Project Lab sessions since they began in February 2nd.
That's right, yep.
What inspired you to come along? And can you tell us a little bit about your lab experience?
Well, I think, the whole fires experience and COVID experience, particularly being involved with the chamber, and that was a pretty horrific time. Immediately post the fires, the council was asking all of the local shire chambers to be present at a weekly meeting around recovery and what's happening, just to so they could keep their finger on the pulse. We could report back and then take stuff back to our members and to our community. So I guess through that I got very worn out by that process, but now, having had a little bit of a spell and still keen to take part in community stuff, I saw that your project, which I think is great, and you should be rewarded for, applauded for. I just wanted to get back in, feet first.
And we're so glad to have you, feet first and all. The Project Lab, for our listeners, is a space for community to come together, to be supported to develop project ideas. And these can be project ideas big and small. It can be a walking group for you and your neighbourhood, or it could be a digital sign. It's hosted fortnightly at the Eden Library event space. So, Peter, you're working with a team of other Project Lab superstars on a really, really exciting project. So can you tell us a little bit about that project?
Yeah, sure. Our project got a better name last week, and that is to be prepared to party.
Love
which it. I think is a bit more captivating, and people might jump on board a bit more with that. In its early stages, that project took on a bit of a neighbourhood watch type feel. So it's, I guess, for everybody to be prepared for disaster and to be in a functioning community, we need to be able to have conversations and communicate with one another more readily than perhaps we do now. Facebook has been a pretty bad thing to enter our lives around community communication, because it seems to happen, via a screen and a keyboard. But this project kind of cancels that out, and the intent of Be Prepared to Party goes back to something that I remember happening on the Lookout and in a couple of other isolated places in town. I think there was one in Flora Street where they had the community, or the local community down to street level, held these get-togethers. And, they came under the label of Christmas party, but that's not really what it was all about. It was just about them coming together. And I see that as being a great way to move forward into being more prepared for disaster. And a lot of people in Eden, especially after the recent events, think about disaster in terms of that being bushfire. But of course, we're a coastal community, and we've got New Zealand just across the ditch from us, who could quite easily have some seismic activity that'll present to us some sort of tsunami, which we won't be prepared for. We're not prepared for. So, we need to be a cohesive bunch to be able to work through anything, really. And what I saw in the fires, during the fires and immediately after the fires, was that we are able to come together to get things done. That would be so much better if we were already on talking terms, I guess, is one way of putting it. And certainly knowing each other, because there's in our community today, we hear in the lab even that there's quite a few people that turn up that they know their neighbours, but they don't know everybody in their street. And I go back to my childhood here, and I was probably wrong, but I always thought that I knew everybody, the whole town I knew. But maybe I didn't, but I certainly knew everyone in the street and used to talk to them. And that doesn't happen anymore, and we need to change that.
Mm. Yes, and the research tells us that, a well-connected community is a well-prepared community. And I love that wonderful play on words you've got for your event title, Be Prepared to Party. It's just wonderful. Now, the Project Lab, as I said, runs fortnightly. Community members come along. They're supported to develop their project ideas, and they're mentored by members of the disaster preparedness team, but also representatives from the Bega Valley Shire Council, who we're partnering with to host the lab. Now, we mentor community through a process of project development. So from the discovery phase through to the planning stage and then into the implementation stage. So, Peter, how did the lab support you to develop these project ideas?
Well, it's quite interesting what happens in the lab. We just we choose a topic, we get around a table and we start talking about the topic, and people are free to move. If they either just don't fully agree with that topic, they go to another table which they might agree with or be able to have some input into. And one of the things that's really good about this process is that it's quite a safe place. There's no one's going to be howled down or told that their ideas are stupid. They're just simply not. So what happens in the lab is that you'll just start talking about this topic, and ideas will come out of it. They'll be massaged by others at the table, and then the better, for want of a better term, the better heads in the room will sort of drift in and perhaps just provide a little bit of direction, get things back on track, and facilitate the way through, and actually provide a little bit of confidence for those that are sitting around the table into the project and the way that it's forming up, so that they're more led into a better outcome.
Mm-hmm. And, several heads are better than one. Everyone's got wonderful things to contribute to this process. And yes, you're right, we're forming quite a community at the lab, and there's lots of opportunities, obviously, to talk about your project ideas and to do some project planning, but there's also opportunities to socialise and be social, and we provide yummy dinner. I've been bringing along some Easter eggs, which have been immensely popular.
They have been. So have the dinners.
So just come for the eggs.
And I just want to flick back to something there that we were told, and this is an example of what happens in these labs. We're talking about the need for there to be, for the different agencies to run workshops where people could come along and get some idea of what they do, what their equipment is, how they work, run through planning. And then we heard from one of the people at the lab that at one of these things that the RFS put on in, I think it was Bermagui, the RFS turn up, they've put all the gear out, and they're waiting for the public to turn up. One person turned up to that. And I think that points to the fact that we as a community don't really want to go to those things and be served up that information. And I think that these community groups getting together, like your street party, and then inviting them, the agencies, into that space to give a condensed version, and then perhaps later round things out with, maybe bring some equipment or whatever. I think it's a more successful model, really.
It's a great way to form connections with those agencies and form connections in communities. It's certainly a great complement to what the agencies are doing.
Absolutely.
So what do you see then, Peter, is the value of these types of community-led projects for disaster preparedness?
Well, when I stopped and thought about after the first lab, what just happened there, and how did that form up in my mind as what was the worth of it? I just thought that, I've been involved with the Innovation Hub a little bit in Bega, and the first time I was there, I thought, wow, this is fantastic. This is it's a very real tangible thing, full of intangible things that you can, great things come out of it. And that's what I thought about with the project lab, looking around, our table was basically drilling down into this one thing that become the street parties thing. Other tables had 3 and 4 projects sort of bouncing around, and they were dipping in and out of them and saying, you'll be working on one thing, they'll get an idea from what's happening in that project about one of their other projects, and it's really fantastic the way that ideas seemingly come out of nowhere, and people can be talking in jest about a subject. It's always nice to have a bit of fun. People can be talking just about a subject, and an idea will come out of that is gold,
Absolutely. The discovery phase of project design and development can be magic, that very effervescent feeling you get when these project ideas bubble to the surface, and the power of community when people come together and put their heads together.
Absolutely.
To enact change. It really is very, very powerful. Now we're going to have a break for a minute. We're going to have a musical break. We're going to play another song chosen by you, Peter. You've chosen Paul Kelly's Time and Tide. Tell us about that.
Yeah, great. There's another great musician, and an Aussie one at that. It's just another song. Like most of these songs, I think that are really not well known by a really well known artist, and the lyrics in both that Neil Young song and this one deserve a good hard listen.
Yes, well, let's take a good hard listen then at Paul Kelly, Tide and Time. That was Paul Kelly, Time and Tide, a track chosen by our very special guest sitting here in the chair with me this morning, Peter Wider. Peter Wider has come along to talk with us about the Project Lab, which is a fortnightly initiative that the Disaster Preparedness are hosting at the Eden Library event space, where community members are invited to come along and be supported to develop their project ideas. Now, Peter, at our project labs, we talk about quick wins and long-term goals. So quick wins, things we can do now to make a difference. Longer term projects are things that we can initiate over the longer term that might take a little bit longer to create impact in the community. So is your project team working on any quick win initiatives, and can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, Jodie. We have in the planning or in the wanting, I suppose, we want to try and get 3 pilot street parties going in different areas in town. Maybe resurrect the old Lookout one and get a few people. There's been a few people move out and move into the Lookout. So just try and light a fire back under that, get that happening. And in a couple of other places in town. And if we could get 3 pilots going and then just sort of monitor those and see how they go, and then maybe feed them back into the lab. The sooner we have them, the sooner, the more chance we've got of finessing it, I suppose, in the lab, and then push on to having more of those in different areas of town. And of course, the ultimate thing is, of course, that the whole town has experienced this, and then slowly but surely, the street parties can move into being more suburb parties or area parties. And, you don't want it to become a really big thing, like as in the whole town getting together. Maybe we do,
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, there you go. So, that's the quick win is the 3 streets and get them to happen and have an outcome and see what the people want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a potential model then that can be picked up by other streets and neighbourhoods. So what are some of the longer term plans for your project, Peter?
Well, of course, I think I probably just touched on those then, is for those to be worked through and for them to exist throughout the whole towns, and the outlying communities. There's a bit of the aim of these street parties is to solve a little bit of social disconnection and improve the social connection. And when we go down to our small communities, there's still a little bit of that that's crept into our smaller communities that perhaps we didn't think that would ever happen, but it has. And Eden could perhaps look out to those outlying areas and try and get that happening out there a little bit. I want to just go back to, if I may, one of the points that I was thinking about in the preparation for this was that in the days of the 1920 bushfires, I was really horrified when the Shire's general manager said that this would have to be a recovery that was led by the community. And I thought, wow, we felt like we were sort of left up to our own, deserted, if you like, immediately after the fires. And now the recovery, we're going to have to look after that as well. So I was really taken aback, gobsmacked. But now I get it. 3 years on, I get it. It's actually the only way that it can happen so that it's sustainable, so that the community might agree with it. So it really is up to the community to get on with this, and it's not just the Bega Valley Shire, it's not just Eden, it's not just one section of Eden, it's the whole of Australia that needs to think about these things that way. The government's there for a very good reason, but there are some things that they simply can't do. We know a lot of things that they can't do well, and this is one thing that they can't really do at all.
Yes. So you might have actually addressed my next question in your response there. Now, at our Resilient Eden workshops in November of last year, we asked our people who come along to reflect on what their vision was for a more resilient Eden and surrounds. So I know that you attended that workshop and you responded to this question, but I'm wondering if you could share some of those insights with our listeners here. We asked, what does a well-prepared and resilient Eden and surrounds look like to you?
Yeah. So for us all to be comfortable in the decisions that are made by others on our behalf, and for them to be prepared for any upcoming emergency, we have to be connected as a community. If we're all connected as a community, we can do anything, absolutely anything. And if we're not, then we rely on others, as we did in the fires, that come along and say, you've got to get out of this place. You've got to, if we're not connected as a community, we won't be seen to be a community, and that's what we need to do.
Yeah. Wonderful. And we also need to be prepared to party.
That's right.
These wonderful street parties that Peter's project team is working on at the Disaster Preparedness Project Lab. Now, the next session of our Project Lab is Thursday, March 16th. All are welcome, and we love to welcome newcomers. So come along. Hear what we're all about, and perhaps you might want to join Peter's Prepared to Party team, or perhaps you have ideas of your own you wish to progress. If you don't have a project idea, you're just curious, we really welcome that curiosity. Come along and see what we're all about. We will feed you, we will provide you with good company. Your cup will be filled with lots of Project Lab goodness.
We'll party with Easter eggs.
It is a fantastic space. As Peter said, it's a safe space. It's a space to come together. We look forward to seeing you there March 16th at the Eden Library event space at 5:30 we kick off. Now, I want to thank you very much, Mr. Peter Wider, for chatting with us today. It was a fabulous chat that I had with you, and I look forward to seeing you at our next Project Lab.
Thanks very much, Jodie, and you need all the praise for the work you're doing. It's great.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Now, just a few announcements before we go. Our friends at the SES are holding an open day at their Eden unit, 2 Warringah Street, Eden, on March 12th. There will be displays and demos. You can learn how to prepare for floods and storms and tsunamis, go on a unit tour, and meet your local New South Wales SES members. You can even find out more about how to volunteer. They're a wonderful organisation made up of volunteers doing really great things. Make sure you get along March 12th from 10 to 3 p.m. Now, if you are listening to a repeat of this episode on Wednesday 15th, you might and you want to find out more about the SES and how to volunteer, you can jump onto their website at www.ses.newsouthwales.gov.au and find out more about the SES and all the wonderful work they do. And the Capable Communities Big Mac Workshop is on Saturday, March 18th from 9 a.m. at the Jigimi Farm Hall in beautiful Broadwater. Thank you all for joining us. Now, I'm super excited for our next episode because I've invited along members of our disaster preparedness youth group to chat with us about their experiences with the group and the wonderful work that they've been doing. I'll also be chatting with our new and very brilliant youth-led disaster risk reduction team, John Rix Aldridge and Jackie Philby. Jackie and John will be chatting with us about the youth-led disaster risk reduction project and the wonderful programs and initiatives that they're working on with young people. Join us on Wednesday 22nd for that discussion. Our episodes are recorded live every fortnight, but are also repeated on the following week, so you can listen to us twice if you choose to. So I will see you next time.